Do you want to hear a story that will make you shiver and shout revenge? Do you want to know what happens next? If you do, hit like and drop a comment below. Do not subscribe to the YouTube channel or you will miss the next twists. Our main character is Claire Peterson, a sweet woman of 67 years. She has lived through sunlit days and stormy nights. Her story spans decades of love, pain, hope, and fury. Claire Peterson lives at Riverbend Estates, a quiet place with neat lawns and shy neighbors. She spent her life teaching children, baking bread, and caring for the stray cats in her yard. Her son Michael was born when she was young, and he grew up under her constant care. She loved him more than anything. Now, on a warm spring morning, Claire sits at her kitchen table with a cup of tea in her hand. The steam rises and curls like tiny ghosts above the cup. Her window looks out on the green grass and her rose garden. She hums a soft tune and thinks about the dinner she wanted to share with her son and his wife tonight. She planned to make meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and her famous apple pie. Her husband passed many years ago, but she still sets the table for 4 out of habit. Just then her phone buzzes. Claire picks it up with gentle hands. She opens the text from Michael. Her heart flutters. She reads, "You weren't invited to dinner. My wife doesn't want you there." But Claire's hand freezes in midair. Her eyes fill with tears. She feels a cold block of ice in her chest. She blinks again and again, thinking her eyes are playing tricks on her. A million questions roar in her mind. Why? What did I do? My baby doesn't want me. She drops the phone onto the table. It rattles against a spoon. She tries to speak, but no words come. She closes her eyes and breathes in deep. Memories flash like an old movie. She remembers the first time she taught Michael how to ride his bike. He was 3 and terrified. Claire ran behind him, holding the seat, humming a happy song. He smiled wide when he balanced. Then he fell and skinned his knee. Claire wrapped him in her arms and kissed the scrape until he giggled through tears. She remembers the day he graduated from high school. He stood tall in his cap and gown, beaming at her as she clapped until her palms hurt. She cried tears of joy that day and hugged him tight. She remembers the day he married Jessica. Claire watched the bride walk down the aisle in a white dress that sparkled under the sun. Claire's heart soared, but deep down she felt a tingle of worry. She did not know Jessica well. She prayed they would get along. Through the years, Claire tried to be a good mother-in-law. She baked cookies for Jessica's birthday. She sent flowers when Jessica had a bad day at work. She offered to watch their baby when they needed a break. But Jessica never called her back. She always said she was busy. Claire shrugged it off. She thought everyone got busy. She told herself not to take it to heart. She kept baking, kept sending cards, kept hoping that one day Jessica would smile at her and say thank you. But tonight the hope died. Claire presses her hand to her mouth. She feels dizzy. She whispers, "Why, Michael? Why would she say I am not invited?" She stands up and walks toward the living room. Her legs shake like jelly. She sees the old photo frames on her mantel. A wedding photo of her and her late husband Tom, smiling at each other under a decorated arch. A picture of Michael as a baby, wrapped in a blanket, sleeping on her chest. A family photo at Christmas with Michael, Jessica, and their baby girl Lucy. Lucy was 2 then, clutching a stuffed bear. Now that photo looks like a cruel joke. Claire sinks into her favorite armchair. She stares at the wall and feels a lump forming in her throat. She wants to call Michael. She wants to scream at him. She wants to cry in his arms. But she cannot. She cannot move. Down the hall, her cat Whiskers pads quietly, curious about the noise. He rubs his head against her ankle. Claire kneels and strokes his soft fur, trying to calm herself. Whiskers purrs. His purr is warm and steady. Claire breathes in the sound and closes her eyes for a moment. She thinks back to a less painful time. The week before, she helped her neighbor Mrs. Johnson find her lost keys. They searched under rose bushes and behind the fence. Claire even crawled on her hands and knees in the mud. When the keys turned up in a bird bath, Mrs. Johnson cried and hugged Claire tightly. Claire laughed and said it was just a small kindness. That simple act made her heart light. She felt proud of being helpful. She believed that small kindnesses made the world a softer place. But kindness did not help her now. Claire picks up the phone again. The text from Michael still stares at her. She reads it over slowly. "You weren't invited to dinner. My wife doesn't want you there." Her breathing speeds up. She touches the words on the screen with her finger. They feel like tiny knives. But in her mind, she finishes the sentence. "But I did nothing wrong. I only wanted to love." Her eyes sharpen with determination. Tears still burn, but something else sparks inside her. A fierce fire. Revenge. In her mind, she plans, "Tomorrow I will go see Michael at his office. I will tell him how I feel. I will not beg. I will demand respect." Her pulses thrum. The sun outside slides down behind a cloud. The room darkens by inches. Claire stands up. She grabs her coat. She feels the old leather feel smooth under her fingers. She shakes her head and whispers, "No more hiding. No more crying." She walks to the door. Her heart pounds like a drum. She steps outside onto her porch. The maple tree in the yard sways gently in the breeze. The air smells of fresh grass and rain that might come later. She looks down at the pavement. A drop of rain falls on her sleeve. She lifts her face to the sky and breathes in deeply. Raindrops fall faster now. The sky turns gray. Thunder rumbles in the distance. Claire Peterson stands on her porch in Riverbend Estates, drenched by rain, holding her phone tight. She reads the text one more time, and she smiles a little. Her revenge begins now. Suddenly, a flash of lightning cracks the sky open, and a loud thunderclap shakes the ground. The power in the neighborhood blinks out. Darkness sweeps over the street. Claire's eyes widen. The storm has arrived. Darkness swallowed Riverbend Estates as Claire stepped off her porch. Rain pounded the pavement, drumming on her raincoat like a wild drummer. The flash of lightning earlier had been more than a show. It knocked out power across the neighborhood. Street lamps winked off, leaving the world under a shroud of wet black. Claire pulled her coat tighter and clicked the button on her old flashlight. A thin beam cut through the gloom. Her heart hammered as she walked to her car. The storm whipped her hair across her face. Thunder growled overhead like an angry bear. Each step felt heavy, but she pressed on. Tonight, nothing would stop her. She unlocked her sedan and slid into the driver's seat. The interior light flickered, then died. She breathed out slowly and turned the key. The engine roared to life. Rain lashed the windshield, but her wipers cleared a path. She steered onto the road, tires hissing on wet asphalt. The drive to Michael's office in downtown Meadowbrook wasn't far, only 10 miles, but the storm made it feel twice as long. Puddles grew into slick mirrors on the road. A swell of adrenaline pulsed through Claire's veins. She thought of Michael's text. "You weren't invited to dinner. My wife doesn't want you there." How dare they treat her so cruelly? Lightning forked across the sky. In that flash, Claire saw a figure under a lone oak tree at the curb. A young woman with auburn hair, drenched, clutching a briefcase. Claire slowed and rolled down her window. "Are you all right?" she called. The woman looked up, startled. Rain dripped from her chin. "My car broke down," she shouted back over the thunder. "Can you give me a lift to the gas station?" Claire hesitated. She didn't know this stranger, but something in the woman's eyes, a flicker of fear, moved her. She unlocked the passenger door. "Hop in," she said. The woman climbed in, shaking. "Thank you," she gasped. "I'm Tara Willis." She pressed a tissue to her forehead. "I was heading home from work. My car stalled." Claire nodded. "I'm Claire. I'm going to Meadowbrook." I can drop you at the station near 5th and Main. Tara's face lit up in relief. Please, that would be wonderful. Claire eased back onto the road. The beam of her flashlight flicked off as headlights from an oncoming car blinded her. She blinked until the lights passed. In the rearview mirror, she caught her own determined face narrow. As they drove, Claire learned that Tara worked at a nonprofit downtown. She had stayed late to finish a grant proposal. The storm hit, and her car refused to start. Claire listened and sympathized. For a moment, she forgot her own pain. Tara's voice trembled when she spoke of the long hours and the fear of missing tomorrow's deadline. Claire offered kind words and a warm smile. She relaxed a little. In another life, she might have just been a nice neighbor helping out in a storm. But tonight, she had other battles to fight. They reached the gas station. Neon pumps glowed dull in the dark. Tara stepped out and hugged Claire's arm. "You're an angel," she said. "I don't know what I'd have done alone." Claire nodded, touched. "Be careful walking to your car," she warned. "The ground is slippery." Tara smiled. "I will." She opened the passenger door. "Thank you again. I'll remember this." Claire watched Tara disappear under the awning of the station. Then she climbed back into her car. The warm air from the heater felt comforting against her damp clothes. She let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She checked her watch. 8:45 p.m. Dinner time had come and gone at her home. Michael was probably sitting in a dark condo eating cold pizza, if he had bothered to eat at all. Claire started the car and turned back onto the road. A sudden screech of brakes made her heart lurch. She slammed on her own brakes, tires screaming as they struggled for traction on the slick road. Her car spun sideways, sliding toward a large oak. Claire jerked the wheel, but the rain-slicked pavement betrayed her. With a loud thump, the front bumper struck a low stone wall. The car shuddered and stopped. Claire's pulse raced. She gripped the wheel, eyes closed for a moment. Then she opened them. The windshield was cracked spiderweb thin, but not broken. She tested the ignition. The engine was still running. She exhaled and willed her hands to stop shaking. She switched on her flashlight. Raindrops glistened in its beam. Outside, the storm raged on. Claire waited until her breath slowed, then carefully reversed and steered back onto the road. Every bump reminded her that revenge sometimes comes with its own wreckage. At last she reached the tall glass tower of Parkview Plaza, where Michael's firm rented the 12th floor. She parked in a dim lot and raced inside the lobby, her heels clicking. Water dripped from her coat onto the marble floor. She followed the directory to the elevators. Inside the elevator, she pressed the button for floor 12. The doors closed and the car hummed upward. Claire glanced at her reflection in the metal wall. Smeared mascara dark circles under her eyes, but her chin was held high. Her revenge would be measured and sharp. The doors opened. A lone security guard sat behind a desk, reading a magazine. Claire approached him. "I'm Michael Peterson's mother," she said, voice steady. "I need to see him." The guard looked up, surprised. "I don't see him on the list," he said, flipping pages. "Did he schedule a meeting?" "I'm unscheduled," Claire replied. "This is important." The guard frowned. "Hold on." He picked up a phone and dialed. Claire watched him whisper into the handset. After a moment, he nodded. "Fine. You can go up." He motioned to the stairs. Claire thanked him and took the stairs 2 at a time. Her legs burned, but she felt alive. When she reached the 12th floor, she paused outside Michael's office door. Rainwater dripped from her hair onto the carpet. She wiped it away with her sleeve. She opened the door without knocking. The office was dark. The power was out after all, but a small emergency light glowed red. A desk lamp on Michael's desk flickered weakly from his backup battery. Papers were scattered everywhere. The computer hummed on battery power. Claire stepped in. "Michael," she called softly. No answer. She moved toward the desk and saw a note stuck under a paperweight that read, "Meeting moved to the after-hours club. Don't be late." It had Jessica's handwriting. Her chest tightened. Jessica had lied. She had taken Michael away from Claire entirely. Claire curled her fingers around the note. Her nails bit into the paper. She felt the first fierce surge of rage. Suddenly, the emergency light blinked off and the office plunged into near-total darkness. Only the stubborn desk lamp glowed. Claire's breath caught. She heard a low creaking from somewhere. An old sprinkler pipe? Or maybe the floor settling. Outside, thunder growled low. Claire swallowed hard. The note in her hand crumpled. She raised her head, listening. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, slow and deliberate. Someone was coming. Her heart pounded so loud she nearly couldn't hear her own thoughts. She pressed her back against the cool door frame. Lightning cracked outside the window, followed by a thunderclap that rattled the glass. Claire's eyes widened as the office door handle began to turn. Claire's heart pounded as the office door clicked open. In the dim red glow, a tall figure stepped inside. Claire pressed herself against the door frame, clutching the crumpled note in her hand. Rainwater dripped from her hair, pooling on the carpet at her feet. "Mom." Michael's voice echoed in the dark room. He flicked on the weak desk lamp, illuminating his anxious face. His eyes widened when he saw her drenched coat and the note in her trembling fingers. Claire let out a shaky breath. "Michael," she said softly, "I needed to see you." Michael swallowed. He looked at the note and back at her. "You weren't invited to dinner," he repeated. His voice sounded flat, as if he had read the words 1,000 times but never felt their weight until now. Claire stepped fully into the office. She dropped the note onto his desk. "I saw your text," she said. "I know Jessica doesn't want me there." Michael's shoulders slumped. He ran a hand through his wet hair. "Mom, You didn't even try to stop her." Claire's voice cracked. Tears welled in her eyes. "I've been your mother for 67 years. I've given you everything I had, and you let her push me away." Michael looked down at the note. "She never told me to send that text," he whispered. "I did it. I'm sorry." Claire blinked in surprise. "You sent it." Michael nodded. "I thought it was easier. I thought it would make things less awkward. But I see now it only made it worse." Claire's anger softened, replaced by a squeeze of relief. She reached across the desk and touched his arm. "Michael, I just wanted to share a meal with you both. I made meatloaf and apple pie." He offered her a sad smile. "I remember your cooking. It's the best in the world." Thunder rumbled outside. Claire pulled her hand back and crossed her arms. "Then why did you let her push me out?" Michael sighed and sank into his chair. He rummaged in a desk drawer and pulled out a small framed photo of Claire and his late father on their wedding day. He placed it on the desk. "I didn't know how to balance you and her. I thought choosing silence would help." Claire knelt beside his chair. "Silence hurts more than words." Michael nodded slowly. "You're right." He looked up at her, remorse shining in his eyes. "I want you in my life, Mom. I promise I'll fix this." Claire felt her chest warm. She reached for his hand. For a moment, they sat together in the low red glow, connected by years of memories and fresh understanding. Outside the window, the storm eased. Rain pattered softly against the glass. Claire took a calming breath and let go of her tension. "I want to believe you," she said, "but I need to see it. I need to know you'll stand up for me next time." Michael squeezed her hand. "I will. I swear." They rose together and walked toward the door. Claire's coat dripped onto the carpet. She paused in the doorway and glanced at the hall beyond. "Where is Jessica now?" Michael's face darkened. "She's at the after-hours club," he said. "She's angry I didn't cancel. She wants to talk." Claire's stomach twisted. She nodded. "Then let's go find her." They stepped into the hallway. The emergency lights flickered on, casting long shadows. Claire pulled her coat tighter. Michael led the way down the silent corridor, their footsteps echoing. They reached the stairwell and descended to the ground floor. In the lobby, the security guard dozed over his magazine. Claire and Michael slipped past him and rushed outside into the storm-chilled air. Puddles reflected the neon sign of the After Hours Club across the street. The sign's letters glowed red and blue, swaying slightly in the wind. Michael opened the door with a stiff hand. Inside, the club was warm and loud. Music pulsed and laughter echoed off dark wood walls. Claire squinted through the dim light. She spotted Jessica standing by the bar, arms crossed, heels tapping the floor. Jessica's dark hair was sleek, her expression hard. Claire's heart stuttered. She clutched Michael's arm. He gave her a small nod and stepped forward. As they approached, the music thumped louder. Jessica's eyes flicked to them, and her mouth twisted into a sneer. "Look who showed up," she said, voice icy. "You really brought your mother, Michael?" Claire steadied herself. She took a step forward, but before she could speak, the chandelier above the bar creaked loudly. Everyone in the club froze. Then, with a thunderous crack, the chandelier's central chain snapped. Crystal droplets rained down in a shower of glass, crashing onto the wooden floor around Claire, Michael, and Jessica. The music screeched to silence as patrons screamed and ducked for cover. Claire's eyes widened. She reached out to Michael, and they both gasped as the chandelier swung dangerously, right above them, the glass glinting in the club's dim light. The world held its breath. Claire's breath caught as the chandelier swung above her and Michael. Crystal shards glinted in the club's dim light like falling stars. Claire grabbed Michael's hand and pulled him back just before the chandelier crashed to the floor where they had been standing. Glass shattered everywhere with a deafening crash. Screams tore through the room. A wave of panic surged as people scrambled to get away from the broken chandelier and the battered tables beneath it. Claire shoved Michael behind her, using her body as a shield. "Stay down!" she shouted over the ringing in her ears. Her heart pounded as she looked for Jessica. The bride looked frozen with shock, her eyes wide and her heels stuck in splinters of wood. Claire dashed forward, grabbing Jessica's arm. "Move!" she yelled, pulling her toward the exit. Michael scrambled up, helping other frightened patrons stand. He guided Jessica's legs free of splinters, and together they all stumbled toward the back door. Rain from outside blew in, cold and wet, but it felt like freedom. Claire led them through the storm, heart still hammering. Once outside, they collapsed on the wet pavement, gasping in the rain. The cool air washed over Claire's face, soothing her after the shock. She helped Jessica to her feet. Jessica's cheeks were streaked with tears and raindrops. She looked at Claire, her anger replaced by fear. "Thank you," Jessica whispered, voice trembling. "You saved me." Claire's chest tightened. She realized then that despite everything, they all mattered to each other. She looked at Michael, whose face was pale but filled with relief. "We need to get home," she said. "Let's go somewhere safe." They trudged through the rain toward Claire's car. Michael held the umbrella over Claire and Jessica, though it barely kept them dry. Finally, they reached the parked sedan. Claire opened back door. Michael helped Jessica in, then climbed in beside her mother. Claire started the engine and drove back through the storm. As they rode in silence, the rain eased to a gentle patter. Streetlights flickered on as the power returned. The urgency of moments ago faded into the soft hum of the car. Claire glanced in the rearview mirror at Michael and Jessica. Jessica stared out the window, hands clenched in her lap. Claire parked outside Riverbend Estates under the glow of the porch light. The wet pavement shimmered. She cut the engine and turned toward them. "Come inside," she said gently. They climbed out and followed her through the open door. Inside, Claire made tea, 3 cups with a teaspoon of honey each. She led Michael and Jessica to the living room and handed them steaming mugs. The warmth spread through their hands. Claire sat between them on the sofa. The soft hum of the heater filled the room. Outside, the storm had passed. A full moon peeked through broken clouds, casting silver light across the rose garden. Claire cleared her throat. "It was dangerous tonight," she said. "I didn't plan for the chandelier. None of us did. But I'm glad we're safe." Michael nodded, wrapping his hands around his mug. "You were brave, Mom," he said. "You saved us." Jessica looked between them, her eyes honest and sad. "I judged you too quickly," she said. "I was afraid you'd change our life, afraid you'd come between us. But tonight, you proved you only want to help." Claire felt her throat tighten. She reached out and took Jessica's hand. "I love you both," she whispered. "I only want to be part of your family." Michael put an arm around Jessica. She leaned into him and then looked back at Claire. "I'm sorry," she said, "for the text, for not giving you a chance. I was wrong." Claire squeezed her hand. A small smile brightened her face. For the first time in weeks, she felt peace. The highs and lows of their lives balanced out in that moment. Danger and safety, anger and forgiveness, distance and love. They sat together, sipping tea and watching the moonlight dance across the window. The storm outside was gone, leaving a hush over Riverbend Estates. Everything felt possible again. But as Claire set her mug down on the coffee table, the power flickered once more. The lights dimmed, then went out completely. Darkness swallowed the room. Claire's skin prickled. She reached for the flashlight on the side table, but it wasn't there. In the black silence, she heard a knock at the front door. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Michael and Jessica stiffened behind her. Claire's heart pounded. She whispered, "Who's there?" But only the ticking of the clock answered. Another knock, this time harder. Claire's hand trembled as she moved toward the door. She glanced at her son and daughter-in-law. Their faces were pale in the faint light of the moon. She swallowed and opened the door a crack. Outside stood a tall man in a soaked trench coat, face hidden under the brim of a wet hat. His eyes glowed in the darkness. Claire's pulse raced. She raised her voice, trying to sound calm. "Can I help you?" The stranger lifted one gloved hand, revealing a single crystal from the broken chandelier clutched in his palm. His grip tightened around it, and he let it catch the moonlight. "I'm afraid you're not safe yet," he said, voice low and strange. The crystal glinted like an eye, cold and hard. Claire's blood turned to ice. The room felt impossibly cold. Michael stepped forward, but the man lifted the crystal higher, and the moonlight refracted in a million dancing lights. The stranger smiled, a slow, cruel curve of his lips. Claire stepped back, heart in her throat. She saw the crystal crack in his hand, tiny lines spreading like spider webs. And then, as the crack spidered toward the center, the crystal exploded in a flash of blinding light that filled the hallway and every eye in the room. The blinding flash filled the hallway and spilled into the living room. Claire squeezed her eyes shut. Her ears rang, and her skin felt hot where the light had touched it. For a long moment she could not breathe. Then the flash faded, and for a second the world held its breath. Claire opened her eyes. The stranger with the trench coat was gone. In his place lay a small pile of shattered glass on the welcome mat. The front door stood wide as if nothing had ever stood in the way. Moonlight and rain seeped in, washing over the hardwood floor like silver paint. Michael and Jessica were at her side. Michael's face was pale, and his shirt was damp with rain. Jessica's hands shook so badly the teacup in her lap rattled on the saucer. Neither spoke. Claire steadied her breath. She put a hand on Michael's shoulder and one on Jessica's arm. "It's all right," she said in a calm voice. "He's gone now." But her heart pounded so loud she thought he might hear it in the next town. Jessica stood, clutching the mug. She drew it to her chest and rocked on her feet. "Who was that?" she whispered. Why did he do this? Claire shook her head. I don't know. She swallowed and forced her voice steady. But we need to lock the door and call the police. Michael hurried to the door and shut it. He heard the click of the lock and sighed. I called 911, he said. They're on their way. They said they'd be here in minutes. Claire nodded and led them to the sofa. She lit a flashlight she kept on the side table. Its pale beam cut through the dark. She set it on the coffee table, pointing toward the window so they could see the front yard. We'll sit here until help arrives. They sank onto the sofa. Claire wrapped a blanket around Jessica's shoulders. Michael sat beside them, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. Outside, the rain slowed to a fine mist. The wind still sighed through the trees. Minutes passed in tense silence. Jessica leaned into Claire and whispered, I'm sorry I was so cold before. I was scared of losing Michael to anyone, especially you. I didn't mean to hurt you. Claire hugged her gently. I know, she said. Fear can make people do strange things, but we love each other. That matters more than fear. Michael reached out and took his mother's hand, then Jessica's. We're a family, he said. We'll keep each other safe. Claire smiled, her heart lighter. She squeezed their hands. They sat like that, 3 hearts beating together in the quiet room. Then, almost without warning, the distant wail of sirens rolled through the night. The sound grew louder until it split the air, sharp and urgent. Claire rose and walked to the window. Headlights cut through the mist. A red and white patrol car slowed in front of the house. 2 officers jumped out, radios crackling. Claire opened the door. I'm Claire Peterson, she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. Michael and Jessica joined her, looking as damp and shocked as she felt. Officer Ramirez spoke first. He was tall and kind-faced. Mrs. Peterson, are you all right? He asked. We got your call about a suspicious person. Claire nodded. He was here, she said. He held that crystal, then it exploded. He laughed, then vanished. Officer Ramirez frowned. He looked down at the jagged glass crystals on the mat. We'll need to take these for evidence. He crouched and picked up a few pieces with gloves. Did he say anything? Claire shook her head. Only, you're not safe yet. And then the flash. The officer glanced at the dark street. Strange. He stood and looked back at her. We'll search the neighborhood. Stay inside. Keep your doors locked. I'll have another unit patrol the block. We'll check your security cameras too. Claire closed the door and locked it again. Inside, they followed her back to the sofa. Officer Ramirez tapped on the glass of the flashlight. Keep this on, he said. My partner and I will check around. Call me if you see movement outside. He left, and the house felt very empty. Claire clicked off the flashlight. The room went dark except for the weak glow of the hallway night light. Claire lit a candle on the coffee table. Its small flame danced like a friendly ghost. Jessica blew out a breath. I can't believe this happened, she said softly. Claire reached for Jessica's hand again. We're safe now, she said. We're together. Michael leaned back and closed his eyes. I wish I understood why he chose us. Claire hugged her knees. Maybe it's not about us, she said. Maybe it's about what that crystal means. It came from the chandelier that nearly killed us. Whoever he is, he knows more than we do. They sat quietly, a candle flame and the muffled hum of the storms, and their only company. After a few moments, Jessica stood. I'm going to check on Lucy, she said. Lucy, their daughter, was asleep in her crib at the babysitter's. At least that was the plan. Jessica's eyes filled with worry. I should never have gone out tonight. Claire rose and put a hand on Jessica's shoulder. We can't change tonight, she said, but we can protect tomorrow. Let's all go and check on her. They walked to the door and stepped outside. The night air was cold but calm. A few raindrops still clung to the leaves. They made their way down the porch steps to the driveway. Michael turned on a second flashlight. They drove to the neighbor across the street, Mrs. Green, the babysitter who lived in the little yellow house. Her porch light was on. Claire knocked gently on the door. Mrs. Green opened it, looking concerned. "Oh my," she said. "Are you all right?" Claire nodded. "We had an intruder at my house. He came to my door. We're fine, but Jessica and I wanted to check on Lucy." Mrs. Green stood aside. "She's sound asleep," she said. "I just put her down half an hour ago." Jessica sighed in relief. "Thank you," she whispered. Mrs. Green smiled. "I'll stay until you're comfortable. You two look like you've been through a lot." Claire patted her arm. "Thank you so much." They returned home, holding each other. Claire's heart felt full. Jessica's apology and tears had reminded her why family mattered. They had faced danger and found kindness in each other. They climbed back onto the porch of Riverbend Estates. The house looked peaceful under the moon. Claire opened the door and let them in. Jessica went straight to the kitchen for more candles. Michael checked the locks once again. They settled back in the living room. Claire poured 3 glasses of cool water. They sipped quietly, the candlelight softening the harsh memories of the night. Claire took a measured breath. "Tomorrow," she said, "we'll learn more. I'll talk to a friend who studies old things, like chandeliers and crystals. Maybe she can tell us why that piece exploded." Michael nodded. "We'll find answers." Jessica set down her glass and rested her head on her mother-in-law's shoulder. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. For saving me, for caring, for believing in family." Claire hugged her. "Always," she whispered. They sat together, the flicker of candlelight and the hush of post-storm peace around them. Small kindness had carried them through chaos and fear. Claire felt a soft glow in her chest, proof that love and goodness could be armor against darkness. Just as Claire began to believe the worst was over, a sudden, bone-rattling crash came from upstairs. Their heads snapped up. The chandelier in the foyer had fallen through the ceiling, splintered wood and crystal shards raining down into the entryway. The beam of the upstairs landing light swung wildly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Claire's heart froze. She exchanged a terrified glance with Michael and Jessica. The chandelier's metal frame hung at a crooked angle, swaying above the foyer steps. A long crack ran across the ceiling where it had torn through. The 3 of them stared in horror as dust fell like gray snow. In the heavy silence, Claire realized this was no accident. The stranger's warning had only just begun. They sprinted for the stairs, hearts pounding, as the chandelier groaned again and threatened to break free entirely. Claire's heart thundered in her chest as she and Michael and Jessica raced up the carpeted stairs. Bits of plaster and wood tumbled behind them, clattering down into the foyer like heavy rain. The chandelier's metal frame hung free, swaying back and forth, scraping the ceiling with terrible grinds. Claire put out an arm to steady Jessica, who stumbled over the last step. They reached the landing and huddled under the low light of the hallway lamp. It flickered twice, then glowed steady. Upstairs, the chandelier groaned again. It sounded like a long, frightened cry. They could feel the floor shiver under their feet. Michael swallowed hard. "We have to get out of the house," he said. "Now." Claire took a deep breath. "We need our phones and flashlights. Then we'll go to the neighbor's house again." Jessica's eyes were wide. She held Lucy's small blanket. Lucy had been at Grandma's, but now the baby's things lay here by mistake, a reminder that they were never truly safe. Jessica clicked on her phone's flashlight app. Michael found candles in the hallway closet and handed them to Claire. With 2 phones and half a dozen candles lit, they crept to the top of the stairs. The chandelier's frame scraped again against the ceiling joists and then, with a final jarring groan, it tore free. It crashed down the stairs in a tangle of metal and broken crystals, splintering banisters and sending dust flying. Claire ducked just in time. She felt a shard of wood brush her hair. She grabbed Jessica's hand and Michael's shoulder and yanked them back into the hall. Wood and glass clattered past their feet and thundered onto the floor below. The house shook. When the noise stopped, a thick cloud of dust filled the air. The stairs lay blocked by the wreckage. Claire coughed twice, waving away dust. Michael knelt and blew at a bone-white beam of wood. "We can't go down," he said. "The stairs are gone." Claire's chest tightened. She looked toward the back of the house. "The guest bedroom window faces the driveway," she said. "We can climb out there." Jessica bit her lip. "It's a 2-story drop," she whispered. "What if Lucy was up here? What if someone else is trapped?" Her voice cracked. Claire pressed a finger to her lips. "We'll check." Slowly, she led them down the upstairs hallway toward the door of the guest bedroom. The floorboards creaked under their weight. Every creak made her jump. They reached the door and opened it. The room was in chaos. An empty suitcase lay open. Clothes spilled on the bed and the window stood wide. A short ladder leaned against the sill. Claire realized it was one she had used last month to clean the gutters. Michael must have moved it earlier when they returned from the club. "No one here," Jessica said, stepping inside and scanning the room. "The crib is empty. The mattress is folded against the wall." She pointed to a small footprint in the dust on the floor. "Someone walked here." Claire's pulse skipped. She crouched and examined the print. It was small, barefoot. It led toward the window. "They climbed out," she whispered. "But where?" Michael went to the open window and looked down. The ladder's top rung pressed against the window frame. Beyond, the driveway was dark except for the pool of light from the street lamp. He could not see footprints in the wet grass. Claire joined him. She shone her phone's light down. Jessica watched from behind. "I saw a figure run across the yard," Claire said. "Maybe they—" Claire cut off as a single small shoe lay on the ground, wet and muddy, just beyond the ladder's reach. Jessica gasped. "That's Lucy's shoe." She rushed forward and scooped it up. The shoe was soaked but intact. Its pink tip was dirty with mud. She couldn't have climbed out alone. Michael frowned. "Then someone took her." His voice was low and grim. "Maybe that man, the stranger. He left the crystal. Maybe he wanted more." Claire's hand trembled around the candle she held. "We need to call the police again," she said. "Tell them Lucy's missing." Jessica hugged the shoe to her chest. Her eyes filled with tears. "Please," she whispered, "let her be safe." Claire knelt and hugged her. "She will be," she said, trying to sound firm, though her heart felt fragile. "Help is coming." Michael pulled out his phone and dialed 911. Claire and Jessica moved to the window, peering into the dark yard. The storm had stopped completely. The silence was a heavy living thing. Michael spoke in rapid words. "Claire caught child missing, second floor window, and suspect with crystal." Then he ended the call. "They're sending more units. They have helicopters on the way." Claire let out a shaky breath. She stood and placed a hand on Jessica's shoulder. "You rest here," she said. "Michael and I will search outside." Jessica nodded, tears still running down her cheeks. She sank onto the guest bed, hugging the muddy shoe. Claire and Michael climbed through the window and onto the ladder. They moved quietly down into the damp grass. Outside, the neighbors' houses lay dark. No porch lights shone except one across the street at Mrs. Green's. Police cars lined the road, blue and red lights flashing. Officers fanned out with flashlights, calling Lucy's name in soft tones. Claire and Michael joined them. Claire called Lucy into the night. Her voice shook, but she called again and again. The officers answered back, "We have nothing here, ma'am." Michael squeezed Claire's arm. "She can't be far," he said. "Maybe the stranger took her to the woods behind the park." Claire nodded. She pointed down the street. "We need to search the park area." They moved in a line with flashlights held high. The grass was wet, and their shoes squelched. Claire tried to spot tiny footprints, but found none. The park's edge was dark and thick with trees. A rustle sounded ahead. Claire froze and pointed. Michael raised his light. Beneath the trees, a small dark shape crouched. Claire's heart leapt. She ran forward, shouting, "Lucy!" The shape stiffened. A small human figure turned. It was not Lucy. It was a stray dog, skinny and matted, sniffing at a plastic bag. It yelped as Claire approached and dashed deeper into the woods. Claire caught her breath, anger and relief mixing. Michael patted her back. "Sorry," he said. "I thought—" "No," Claire said. "Good idea checking here." She shone her light deeper into the trees. "Let's keep going." They continued the search, but minutes stretched into an hour. No sign of Lucy. Claire's hope dimmed, but she forced herself to keep shining the light into every corner. At last, an officer's radio crackled. "Unit outside the old Mill Road warehouse reports movement." The warehouse was a mile away, an abandoned building with broken windows and rusted doors. Claire's heart lurched. "Let's go," she said. They rushed back down the street to where police cars idled. Engines were warm, lights still flashing. Claire climbed into the passenger seat of a patrol car. Michael climbed into the back with another officer. The car sped off toward Mill Road, tires screeching on wet pavement. As they turned onto the narrow road, Claire saw the warehouse looming in the headlights. It looked like a giant skeleton. Broken windows like empty eye sockets, jagged edges of metal siding waving in the breeze. Michael's voice came through the glass. "He's here," he said. "He has Lucy." Claire's breath caught. She leaned forward. Through a broken window, she saw a figure standing in the middle of the warehouse floor, holding something small and wrapped in a blanket. The stranger in the trench coat. Claire's blood ran cold. He lifted his head and turned. The streetlights shone through his hat, but she saw his eyes, dark, gleaming with triumph. The crystal from the chandelier was clenched in his other hand, glowing faintly in the night. Claire's heart pounded, so hard she thought it would break free of her chest. She looked at Michael, who stared back in horror. The patrol car screeched to a stop. Officers piled out, guns drawn. Claire opened the door and ran forward, shouting, "Let her go!" The stranger laughed, low and hollow. He unwrapped the blanket slowly. Inside, Claire could see Lucy's small face, her eyes closed as if sleeping. Claire froze for a moment, tears blurring her vision. Then she charged forward, ignoring the officer's shouts to stay back. The stranger lifted Lucy above his head. The crystal in his other hand caught the moonlight and glowed brighter. Claire reached up, her hands trembling. "Please let her go." The stranger's smile widened. Then, with a sudden twist, he hurled the crystal into the air. It arced above them, spinning like a star. Claire's eyes followed it. Time slowed. The crystal glinted. Then, an explosion of light erupted in the dark warehouse yard, so bright it blinded everyone. The shock wave slammed into Claire, knocking her to the ground. Then, silence and darkness. Claire's ears rang from the bright flash that knocked her to the ground. The world spun in circles around her. She pressed a hand to her head, tasting dust and smoke in her mouth. The night air smelled sharp and metallic. She blinked and saw police lights flickering through the broken warehouse windows. Voices shouted orders, and the stranger in the trench coat lay on the wet grass beside the patrol car, crystals scattered around him like fallen stars. Claire pushed herself up and staggered toward the stranger. Michael was already beside him, shielding little Lucy in his arms. Jessica pressed close to her mother, tears still on her cheeks, her face pale with fear. An officer cuffed the stranger's hands behind his back. Handing Lucy to Jessica, Michael knelt and brushed a strand of hair from his daughter's face. Lucy stirred and opened her eyes, blinking into the flashing lights. She gave a small cry, then reached up with her chubby hand. "Daddy," she whimpered. Michael kissed her forehead. "I've got you," he said softly. "You're safe now." Claire reached out and touched Lucy's tiny foot. "My brave girl," she whispered. "Your grandma loves you." The stranger sat up as another officer searched him. He wore a dazed expression, as if he did not know where he was. His trench coat was torn, and his hat lay next to him in a puddle. The officers pulled out the crystals from his pocket. They were jagged pieces that gleamed in the red and blue lights, each shard etched with tiny lines like spider webs. Officer Ramirez approached Claire. He held one crystal between gloved fingers. "We found these on him," he said. "He had more when he ran inside the warehouse." Claire drew in a shaky breath. "They came from the chandelier," she said. "The one that nearly fell on us at the club." Ramirez nodded. "We'll test them and figure out what's going on. Right now he's under arrest for child endangerment, trespassing, and assault with a deadly object." Claire felt her knees go weak. She sank to one knee beside Lucy's car seat, which an officer had brought outside. Lucy's blanket was damp and her hair stuck to her forehead. Claire gently unwrapped the blanket and dried Lucy's cheek with her thumb. The baby's chest rose and fell evenly. She reached out and grabbed Claire's finger, squeezing it tight. Claire's heart swelled. She looked at Michael and Jessica. Their faces, lit by patrol car lights, showed relief and exhaustion. Jessica knelt beside her, resting Lucy's small shoe next to the car seat. "You all right?" Jessica asked, voice soft. Claire smiled through tears. "Yes," she said. "Thank you both for being so brave." Michael wrapped an arm around Jessica's shoulders. "You were brave too," he said, "especially when you came to get Claire and me after the chandelier fell." Jessica nodded. "I was scared," she admitted, "but I knew we had to stick together." Lucy began to fuss, so Claire scooped her up into her arms. The baby sniffled and then rested her head on Claire's shoulder. "Grandma," Lucy mumbled in baby talk. Claire laughed quietly. She felt as if her heart might burst. She rocked Lucy gently, humming a soft tune her late husband had taught her. The tune reminded her of calm afternoons in her living room, the soft warmth of sunlight on her face. After a moment, the officers led the stranger away. His coat dragged in the mud, and he kept his eyes fixed on the ground. Claire watched him go, feeling a mix of triumph and pity. Whatever magic or power those crystals held, he had been driven by something dark. But now he could not hurt anyone else. Jessica tucked Lucy's blanket around her. "We should go home," she said. "Lucy needs her crib." Claire nodded. "Yes," she said. "Let's go back to Riverbend Estates." They climbed into the back of a police SUV that had been cleared for family transport. Claire held Lucy on her lap, and Michael and Jessica sat beside them. The officer in the front seat drove carefully down the dark road. Rain had paused, but the air still felt damp and heavy. The ride back was quiet. Claire looked out the window at the sleeping houses. Every porch light seemed warm and safe. She pressed a hand to Lucy's back as the baby drifted to sleep again. When they reached Riverbend Estates, the gates were closed, but Officer Ramirez opened them with a nod. He had arranged for extra patrols on their street until dawn. Claire stepped out with Lucy in her arms. Jessica and Michael followed, holding hands. The rain started again in tiny, gentle drops. Claire led them up the porch steps. The front door swung open before she could knock. Mrs. Green, the babysitter, stood inside with a tray of warm milk and cookies. She wore a bathrobe and slippers, her silver hair pinned back. "Oh my," she said, eyes wide. "I heard the patrol cars. Are you all right?" Claire set Lucy in her car seat and nodded. "We're safe," she said. "Thank you for staying here." Mrs. Green smiled and guided them inside. "I stayed up because I was worried. Here you go." She handed Jessica a glass of warm milk and Claire and Michael each a cookie. They sat in the living room, the soft hum of rain against the windows the only sound. Mrs. Green knelt beside the fireplace and placed Lucy's car seat on a rug. "Sleep, little one," she whispered. Lucy yawned and closed her eyes. Claire wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Jessica sipped her milk, eyes heavy. Michael rubbed his forehead, looking drained. Mrs. Green turned to Claire. "That man, do you think he'll come back?" Claire shook her head. "The police have him now. He won't bother us again." Mrs. Green nodded uncertainly. "All the same, I'll stay until morning." Claire smiled gratefully. "Thank you, Mrs. Green." Mrs. Green patted Claire's hand. "Family is precious," she said. "I know." Claire looked at her own small family, her son, her daughter-in-law, her granddaughter sleeping in her car seat. She felt a deep, glowing warmth in her heart. They had faced terrible danger together and come through it stronger. Kindness and love had been their armor. After a few minutes of quiet, Mrs. Green stood. "I'll get Lucy's blanket and music box," she said. "She likes it soft." As Mrs. Green walked away, Claire closed her eyes and let the peace wash over her. The storm outside whispered through the trees. Inside, the fire crackled weakly in the hearth. But just as Claire began to relax, a sudden crash echoed from the kitchen. Plates shattered on the tile floor. The light in the kitchen flickered and went out. Claire's eyes flew open. Her heartbeat skipped. She set down her empty milk glass and stood. Michael and Jessica stared at her. "Not again," Jessica whispered. Claire swallowed hard and moved toward the dark hallway that led to the kitchen. Another crash, louder this time, made her jump. Something heavy hit the wall near the dining room door. The house trembled. Claire's breath caught. She turned and called over her shoulder, "Stay here." But she knew they wouldn't. In a single motion, they were at her side, 3 hearts beating as one. Claire switched on the flashlight she always carried in her purse. The narrow beam sliced through the dark hall. Together, they stepped forward into the blackness, their eyes straining to see. The floor felt sticky under Claire's shoes. She shone the light down and saw a trail of red liquid leading into the kitchen. Jessica gasped and covered her mouth. Michael's face went white. Claire took a cautious step forward, shining the flashlight beam high onto the wall. A picture frame hung crooked, its glass shattered. A dark stain spread across the wallpaper below. She swallowed. The trail led to the center of the kitchen floor. The door to the pantry stood open, its hinges bent. Claire's pulse pounded. She shone the light into the pantry. Cans and jars lay in broken piles. Flour and sugar spilled like snow. And in the back she saw a shadow move. Her throat went dry. She lifted the flashlight higher, the beam trembling. The shadow stepped forward. And Claire gasped as she saw what, or who, stood there. Claire's flashlight beam trembled as she stared into the pantry. The shadow shifted closer, and her heart pounded like a drum in her chest. For a moment she was frozen, unable to breathe. Then she saw. It was Mrs. Green. Her silver hair was matted with flour and sugar, her bathrobe torn at the sleeve. She stood there clutching little Lucy in one arm and a rolling pin in the other. Lucy stirred in her grandmother's arms and yawned. "Oh, my stars," Mrs. Green whispered. She looked more scared than anyone Claire had ever seen. "I ran when I heard the smash. I thought someone might hurt you." Claire let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She lowered the flashlight. "Mrs. Green," she exclaimed. "Thank goodness you're safe. And Lucy, you have her." Mrs. Green nodded, smoothing Lucy's tiny blanket. "I grabbed her when I heard something fall. I hid in here until I knew it was safe." She held up the rolling pin like a shield. Michael and Jessica hurried into the kitchen behind Claire. Jessica knelt beside her mother and hugged Lucy. "You're okay," she whispered. Lucy gave a small babble and reached for her mother's finger. Claire closed her eyes and leaned against the pantry door frame. Relief washed over her in warm waves. The broken plates on the floor and the smashed pantry door suddenly felt like small things compared to finding them all alive. Outside, distant sirens still wailed. Claire moved toward the kitchen table and set down her empty glass. She glanced at the broken dishes and the dark stain on the wall, then at Mrs. Green's frightened face. "Let's get some light in here," Claire said, lifting the first candle from her purse. She placed it on the table and lit it. The soft glow filled the room, pushing back the shadows. Mrs. Green set Lucy down in a high chair nearby and wiped the baby's mouth with a clean cloth. Jessica gathered the broken plates and wrapped them in an old towel. Michael helped Mrs. Green pick up larger shards of glass. Claire watched them work together, her heart softening with gratitude. Kindness and teamwork had carried them through too many near disasters tonight. Once the kitchen was cleared, they sat at the table. Claire poured 3 more glasses of water. Mrs. Green brought cookies on a plate she had hidden behind her back. "I thought you might be hungry," she said with a gentle smile. They ate in quiet comfort. Lucy babbled happily, reaching for crumbs. The storm outside had fully passed. Only the faint whisper of wind rustled the curtains. For the first time since the evening began, Claire felt a flicker of safety. "I'll call for a locksmith in the morning," Mrs. Green offered. "We need new locks and maybe stronger doors." Claire nodded. "Thank you. And I'll check on the alarms and cameras first thing." She glanced at her family, Michael, Jessica, and little Lucy, and felt a surge of protectiveness. "I promise, no one will ever scare us like this again." They finished their snacks and put Lucy to bed in the guest room, where she fell asleep clutching her pink shoe. Claire tucked a night light in the outlet and whispered good night. In the hallway, they turned on all the lamps and plugged in the small security system unit on the living room shelf. Soon the house was filled with gentle light and the hum of the alarm. Claire and Michael stood by the front door, making sure each lock clicked shut. Jessica hugged Claire tightly, resting her head on her shoulder. Just as Claire pressed the deadbolt for the last time, the front door rattled. Cold moonlight spilled through the frosted glass pane, and a heavy thump echoed in the silent hallway. Claire's hand froze on the lock. Michael and Jessica tensed beside her. In the dark shape behind the glass, a silhouette stood very still. 2 eyes glowed faintly, like the crystal shards, but bigger, darker. Claire's breath caught. She whispered, "No, not again." The silhouette raised one hand and pressed a crystal shard against the glass, tilting it so moonlight caught its edge. The pane cracked in a spiderweb of lines. Claire's heart sank as the crack raced outward. She stepped back, but the door shook on its hinges as something pressed harder from the outside. Jessica gasped. Michael put a hand on Claire's arm, but Claire knew this was not over. Not by a long shot. The door splintered with a sharp crack. A long, jagged line ran across the wood beneath the glass. Behind it, the glowing eyes blinked once, slowly, and then the door burst inward in a furious crash of wood and glass. Claire screamed as the crashed door swung open. A wind like a scream rushed into the hallway, and behind it, the intruder stepped through the ruin, crystal in hand, his eyes burning with triumph. Claire's blood ran cold as the stranger burst through the broken door, crystal in hand and eyes blazing. Rain swept in behind him, soaking the hallway carpet in muddy water. Claire stepped between him and her family, heart hammering. Jessica pressed close behind, clutching little Lucy's hand, and Michael moved to block their path. For a moment, time froze. The stranger's coat dripped rain onto the floor. He held the crystal up, its jagged edges glittering like a wicked star. His lips curved into a cruel smile. Claire forced herself to speak. "What do you want?" she called, voice trembling but steady. The stranger laughed, low and hollow. "I'm not done with you," he hissed. Then he threw the crystal at her feet. It shattered on the floor with a sharp crack. Tiny shards spun outward. An entire house seemed to shiver. Jessica gasped and scooped Lucy into her arms. Michael grabbed a nearby lamp and held it like a club. Claire took 2 quick steps back and grabbed her flashlight. "Stay behind me," she ordered, raising the flashlight like a shield. The stranger advanced, feet splashing through the pool of water on the floor. "You thought you were safe," he snarled, "but this house belongs to me now." Less extreme moment. Suddenly, the front hall alarm blared to life, a piercing siren that sliced through the tension. Its red light, strobing in the entryway, made the rainwater glitter like crimson jewels. The stranger flinched and looked around, startled. "Clever," he muttered. He turned, scanning the living room for the alarm panel. Claire realized Mrs. Green's locksmith must have wired it earlier. Michael lunged forward and slammed the door shut behind them, cutting the hall into darkness except for the alarm's flashing glow. Jessica held Lucy tight. "Are you all right?" she whispered, rocking the baby gently. Lucy blinked sleepily but stayed calm. Claire ran to the panel by the staircase and pressed a button to silence the siren. The red light stopped flashing. The house fell quiet again, though rain still pattered against the roof. Michael stood beside Claire. "We can't fight him like this," he said low. "We need to get Lucy out of here." Claire nodded. She pointed toward the back of the house. "There's a service door by the kitchen that leads to the garage. If we can get him into the garage, we can trap him inside." She squeezed Michael's arm. "I'll lead him there." Michael guided Jessica and Lucy down the hallway, keeping them low. Claire turned back to face the stranger, picking up the fallen lamp. He reappeared in the living room doorway, dripping water. "You think you can hide," he sneered. Claire stepped forward, holding the lamp like a torch. "Go away," she said fiercely. "Leave us alone." The stranger's eyes gleamed. He raised his arm, and at that moment the back door burst open. 2 police officers rushed in, guns drawn. Red and blue light flashed in the kitchen behind him. The stranger's head snapped toward the commotion. He hesitated for a split second, long enough for Claire to seize her chance. She threw the lamp at his legs. The metal base struck him hard, and he stumbled back with a pained grunt. Extreme ending. Before Claire could react, the stranger regained his balance and lunged forward with inhuman speed. He grabbed the lamp from the floor, smashed it against the wall, and when the lamp broke, he revealed another shard of crystal hidden inside. He held it aloft, its deadly point catching the police lights, and with a guttural scream he brought it crashing down toward Michael, who was shielding Jessica and Lucy by the kitchen island, and the shard exploded in a shower of blinding white light that filled the room and sent everyone reeling. Claire's vision flared white as the crystal shard hit Michael's shielded forearm. The blast of light ricocheted off the walls, burning through every shadow in the kitchen. The world spun around Claire. She felt the heat of the flash on her cheeks, heard the crackling like thunder. She clutched the lamp base handle, shielding Jessica and Lucy behind her. Michael staggered as the police officers stumbled back from the blast, guns raised but momentarily blinded by the brilliance. When the light finally dimmed, Claire blinked against spots dancing across her vision. The kitchen was wrecked. Shattered cabinets, scorched floor tiles, and molten plastic from the broken lamp. The crystal shard lay at Michael's feet, fractured into dull pieces. The stranger in the trench coat crouched where he had landed, his face twisted in rage and pain. His coat was singed, and smoke drifted from his sleeve. Claire dropped the lamp handle and stepped forward, her voice low but steady. "It's over," she said. "You can't hurt us anymore." He laughed, a sound like metal scraping on metal. "You think you've won?" he sneered, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. He rose unsteadily. "This house, this family, belongs to me." 2 officers flanked him and cuffed his hands behind his back. He rattled against the metal, glaring at Claire. "You'll never be safe," he spat as they hauled him toward the front door. Outside, the sirens had grown to a roar. Flashing lights, painted the walls through broken windows. Claire exhaled, realizing her shoulders had been clenched high under her ears. She turned to Michael and Jessica. Jessica held Lucy tight, and Lucy peered at her grandmother with wide, curious eyes. Michael knelt beside Jessica. "Are you both all right?" he asked. "No one's hurt." Claire checked Lucy's fingers and toes. "She's fine," she said, relief pouring through her. "Just dirty." She pulled a soft cloth from her pocket and wiped Lucy's face. Jessica smiled, tears of relief shining in her eyes. Less extreme moment. An hour later, the police had packed evidence. Crystal fragments, pieces of the smashed chandelier, the stranger's coat and hat. The patrol cars had driven away, taking him to the station. Claire stood in the surviving part of the kitchen with Michael and Jessica. Mrs. Green had arrived, trembling but safe, and was gathering dishes to take back to her house. The rain had stopped, and a pale moon shone through the shattered skylight. Claire leaned against the counter, arms folded. "We did it," she said softly, looking at her family. "We stood together." Michael wrapped an arm around her. "You led us," he said, "with courage." Jessica wiped her eyes. "I was so scared," she admitted, "but you never wavered." Lucy babbled and waved her pudgy arms, as if celebrating along with them. Claire scooped her up and kissed her head. "You're our greatest treasure," she whispered. They shared a quiet moment of gratitude, surrounded by broken tiles and dangling wires. Testimony to the night's horrors, but also to their survival. New extreme event. As they turned to leave the kitchen for the living room, the floor beneath them shuddered. First a faint tremor, then a deep, rattling quake that rippled through the walls. A low, keening rumble rose from the foundation. Lights flickered in the hallway, and the distant portrait of Claire and her late husband Tom swung on its nail, paintings tilting at impossible angles. Earthquake. Jessica gasped. "It can't be," Claire said, heart pounding. "We're not near a fault line." The tremors grew violent. A massive crack appeared in the tiled floor, stretching from the stove to the pantry. The walls groaned as if crying out in pain. Paint peeled in long strips. Lucy let out a startled cry in Claire's arms. Michael grabbed Claire's hand. "We need to get out," he shouted. They ran toward the front door, only to see the shattered chandelier's metal frame, torn free from the ceiling void, swinging wildly in the living room, its jagged crystals clinking like warning bells. The house lurched again, and a thunderous crack echoed. The front wall began to split, revealing a swirling vortex of pale light beneath the foundation, a glowing fissure that pulsed with energy. The air hummed with power, and the crystals in the wreckage around them began to vibrate. Claire's blood ran cold. She pressed her hand to Lucy's chest, feeling the baby's rapid heartbeat. "Hold on to each other," she whispered. But as the walls trembled and the vortex widened, Claire realized this was only the beginning of another, far greater storm.